Whenever I start a new job, I always have a great vision. Getting set up quickly, booking some intro meetings with managers, and getting some quality work done to make a good first impression. But it usually goes like this. I spend hours trying to log into Teams because there's some weird IT issue, just getting generally anxious about the lack of tasks and direction, and even accidentally flagging an important email from my manager as a cybersecurity threat. So given the difficulty and anxiety associated with starting a new job, I thought it would be really cool to discuss the books that have been most useful to me when starting new jobs. We're going to be talking about the top lessons that I've learned from 3 value-packed books. And they're cool because a lot of the ideas are quite weird and unconventional. And most of these books are super short, so you won't spend months trying to read it to prepare for a new job because
ain't nobody got time for that.
Hola amigos, I'm Diego, a software engineer working in London, and if you're interested in reclaiming your time from digital addictions and supercharging your productivity, make sure you hit that subscribe button, join the team, let's get into it. The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins is a book that you see everywhere and is focused on transitioning between one job to the next and making the most out of those first 90 days to make a solid impression as a foundation for you to build upon. So this book was written a while ago and it was initially targeted towards managers, but I think a lot of the teachings inside the book are pretty universal and can apply to anybody, even if you're not a manager. So to be fair, I haven't read this book in its entirety. I've read a few of the chapters and some passages, but when I've asked anybody in my life what book they would recommend to someone starting a new job, a lot of people mentioned The First 90 Days, and I've seen some wonderful reviews online as well. So I did my best to look at tons of summaries of the book as well to fill in the gaps that I hadn't read, and yeah, found some pretty cool things. The first insight that I found incredibly valuable is preparing yourself before the transition. For a lot of us, the pace at which you change jobs is really fast, and we don't really take the time to prepare, research the company culture, research what issues they have, research what you can bring to the table, maybe the gaps that they have in either their processes or their execution or even their team building or management. Understanding, identifying those gaps, knowing the industry, if it's a new industry that you're going into, understanding the threats, the opportunities, the strengths, the weaknesses, understanding all of these things prior to your transition is incredibly valuable because you lay the groundwork, you lay the foundation, and when you start that new job, the new role, you can capitalize on those initial days, initial weeks to make that killer impression and truly build from there. The next one is securing early wins. Establishing credibility initially, Michael Watkins says, is incredibly important. And I know this may seem a little basic perhaps, but seeking out these early victories is not enough. You also have to make them as visible as possible without obviously coming across as a bit of a douche. So make sure you look for these opportunities where you can truly make an important impact, and these will definitely allow you to build trust within the team and to build that momentum so people know they can depend on you and that you create quality work. The next one is to create alliances and build coalitions. A lot of us, when we go into a new job, we don't really take the time to reach out to interesting managers or even people in our team and make that concerted effort to have those one-on-one meetings, not only to understand who they are and have that introduction, but to truly ask these individuals what is the best way to do certain things, what are the best ways to progress within the company, what are the best ways to progress within a certain role, what are the opportunities that are coming ahead that you could take advantage of to truly build that trust, build that credibility and that momentum. It takes a while, it's gonna take many weeks of you booking meetings and going through meetings and preparing interesting questions and interesting points for each of the meetings, but it's definitely worth it. Not only will this give you a lot of information that is very hard to find anywhere else, but it'll also show people probably higher up than you that you're interested and you really want to get the ball moving as fast as possible, and you really care about integrating and connecting with the entire company culture. Rework. This book was written by David Heinemeier Hansen and Jason Fried. It's like a field manual for being faster and more effective in business, but there are so many cool concepts, particularly in the first few chapters, that really apply to any employee starting a new job. It is a super fast read, very short. I listened to it on Audible, and it has really unconventional ideas like the importance of not working overtime and that doing less is the path to success. And I've always been a sucker for books that go against the grain and the status quo, so if you're anything like me, you're gonna love this one. So I split the lessons I learned from this book into 3 categories: general, productivity, and habit changes. In the general section, one of the things they emphasize is momentum, and that one of the most important things you can do whenever you're starting something new is to just start moving and try and build that inertia as fast as possible, because momentum fuels motivation. And whenever you're starting a new job, make sure you have those tasks that you need to accomplish, break them down, those larger projects, and reward yourself during the way. That way you will be much more likely to build that momentum and maintain that motivation and get those early wins that we discussed about. The next thing they emphasize is the importance of short-term planning. So focus on what you're doing today and this week, because long-term planning is mostly guesswork, and long-term planning takes away from action in the present. So the book is very, very much present focused, and I think it's such an important thing to keep in our minds, because whenever we start a new job, there are always longer-term projects, longer-term vision, your career progression. You're thinking about all of these things at the same time, and you tend to lose track of the important things now and how that is actually what is going to build your career, and that's what's going to build your success. So focus on the things right now, make those short-term plans, execute on those short-term plans, and the longer-term things will slowly fall into place. In the productivity section, there's also emphasis on short-term, and it talks about specifically to-do lists and how to-do lists that are too long and projects that are too long can sap morale and completely destroy productivity. Keep your to-do list as basic as possible, have the least amount of items in it as you can, make sure that they're really, really important tasks that you need to get done and have high impact, and don't go crazy in terms of organizing your to-do list. Just organize it visually in terms of importance, so the thing you have at the top is the most important, and then the level of importance for each task decreases as you go down. That's the simplest way to organize it. That's what they recommend in the book. That's what I've been doing for a few months now, and frankly, it's the best system I've found so far in terms of organizing your to-do list, so definitely something to keep an eye on. The next one is that interruption is the enemy of productivity. We've spoken a lot about deep work and how deep work can only truly be achieved with no interruptions, so make sure that those initial weeks in your new job, you try and have those moments of complete deep work where you're trying to build and create those important wins early on, and focus on the important things, block out all distractions, leave your phone at home, turn it off, leave it in the locker, do whatever you need to do to eliminate distractions externally and focus on those most important things. The next lesson is that good enough is fine, and they emphasize trying to look for judo solutions, so solutions that are maximally efficient with the least amount of effort, because in the end, problems can usually be solved with very simple and mundane methods, and good enough can always be turned to great later on. And I think this is a great psychological shift in perspective that can help a lot of people that face perfectionism, particularly within those early moments of getting into a new job, where you feel that everything has to be perfect. And you lose a bit of perspective, because the speed at which you execute tasks initially is also very important. And as we mentioned, if you only focus on one task and try to get that to be perfect, you're going to lose that momentum. So I thought this was a super cool antidote to that perfectionism. And the last thing in the productivity section is a quote that I found really, really enlightening. In the end, what distinguishes people who are 10 times more effective than the norm is not that they work 10 times as hard. It's that they use their creativity to come up with solutions that require 1/10 of the effort. That's just a beautiful way of highlighting the importance of working smart, not hard. So don't jump into tasks like a madman, but take a few minutes to plan the best way to accomplish the task, what your objectives actually are, so that that task is contained and doesn't spill over and be this whole mess. And this will be so valuable, not only those first weeks of a new job, but also into the future of your career. In terms of habit changes, the first thing I want to mention is that share what you know generously. So be as transparent as possible with the information and the knowledge that you have. If you're bringing knowledge from another industry or a different company, make sure that you share it. Obviously, if you have an NDA or things like that, don't break your NDAs. Be as charitable and as generous as possible with your skills and your knowledge, because not only does that prove to people that you're very much invested in the company, but it shows how you're generous, and that people reciprocate that, and they will be generous with their own information, generous with their own skills with you. So try and be as open and transparent as possible. It's not a competition. The more you can collaborate with your team and the more you can collaborate with the people in your company, the better. And even if your company is a little bit competitive or something like that, you can be that voice for change. You can be a little bit different and hopefully inspire people to be more generous and more open and transparent with the information and the knowledge that they have. And the last thing in the habit change section is a cool quote that really resonated with me and goes against a lot of what the modern world tells you that is work, and how being a workaholic or obsessive with work can actually be very detrimental, not only to yourself but to the people around you. And the quote states that workaholics make the people who don't stay late feel inadequate for merely working reasonable hours. The real hero is already home because they figured out a faster way to get things done. Again, work smart and not hard. The next book I want to recommend is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This is a bit of a weird one, and you probably think it's coming out of left field, but let me explain. Obviously, it's very important to know the practical and the theory behind productivity and what you should do in those initial weeks in a new job, because that is gonna help you obviously secure those early wins, create that killer first impression. But I think there's an entirely different domain that most people don't talk about, and that's the psychological and emotional that you definitely need to take care of whenever you're making such a big transition into a new job. Because obviously knowing all the hacks and strategies to advance within a company is very, very useful. But I think the key to sustainable performance is developing that long-term vision, aligning your values and your passion with the work you are doing. And that way you can be as productive as possible and create as much impact as possible in your company. And it's not gonna feel like a slog. It's not gonna feel that much like work. And The Alchemist is a story that focuses exactly on that. It focuses on following your passion, on personal transformation, and it can really inspire you to view your job as part of a bigger journey, a journey of self-discovery and adaptability. And it's a very deep story, a very short but very deep story. And one of the central themes is following your own personal legend. This essentially applies to us because it's much easier to be successful in a job whenever you align your values, your passion, your long-term vision with the work you are doing. If you can manage that, you have the foundation for long-term success. Another key theme of the book is the fact that you should embrace the journey, not the destination. Obviously, it sounds very cliche, but I think you can apply this to a new job, because whenever we face obstacles, especially initially in a new job, we would get very frustrated, very overwhelmed, because you don't want to make a bad impression, you want to do the highest quality work possible. But understanding that those initial weeks are going to be difficult and there's going to be a period of adaptation that is going to be rough, frankly, is very important to keep front of mind, because you would get really discouraged whenever you face those obstacles, and trying to understand that all those things will pass and there will be a time when you will be firing on all cylinders and just killing it is super useful and something to look forward to as well. And focusing on the journey is a great thing to align your values as well, because if you're focused on a destination, be it money, a certain role, a certain position, whenever you get there, there's always going to be a level of dissatisfaction, because we as humans, what we really find intriguing is that search, is that process, is that build up to an objective. When we get to the objective, it's usually very underwhelming because we thought that was gonna be the great thing. What we actually enjoyed was the journey there. And understanding that's how psychology works is super useful. Understanding and taking pleasure in the journey is another great theme that the book tackles. And finally, listening to your gut instinct. In those initial weeks, there's gonna be a lot of doubt because you're entering a new position, everything is new, you don't really know how to do things, you're still trying to find your feet. But trusting your instinct, developing a good instinct as well, is super useful, because during those first few weeks and later on in whatever job you're doing, trusting that instinct and carrying through a vision is gonna be very, very valuable. So if you haven't read The Alchemist, I really, really recommend it. Plus it's also a nice short fiction book that will probably, help you relax and get your mind off things during that period before starting a new job. It's a beautiful book, and all those books are gonna be linked down below. But like we usually do on the channel, I'm gonna give you a little extra book, a little extra something. I know I mentioned 3 books, but this is a book that I read many, many years ago, and it's been very, very transformative in the way that I deal not only with work relationships, but even personal relationships, and taking care of the relationships that you have in your life. The book is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. If you really haven't read it yet, you definitely should. And even if you've read it already, you should go back to it. It's a very short book that is divided into many sub-chapters, which are super fast reads. You can definitely go back and review information all the time. It's very, very cool how it's laid out. And one of the most important things when you're starting a new job is learning how to handle those relationships, how to handle people in your team, how to handle criticism. All of these things are super important. So I wanted to go through some of the best tips that I found within the book. I'm gonna split them into 3 different categories. The first one is in trying to deal with complicated people and situations. The second one, how to create a good impression. And the third one is how to persuade people in general. So in terms of learning how to handle people in complicated situations, the book really emphasizes not criticizing, complaining, or condemning people. This only makes people shut in and not be open to have transformative conversations and important conversations. Be very appreciative in the praise you give. Make sure that is as public as possible. And whenever you're trying to tell someone something you didn't like, or try and, give some constructive feedback, make that as private as possible, one-to-one preferably, so that people don't feel uncomfortable and they feel that you value them and you value their time and you value their reputation and you value their self-improvement as well. The next section, in terms of making a good impression, I want to talk through 6 quick tips. The first one is to become genuinely interested in people. So listen as much as possible, listen more than you speak, ask interesting questions, and try and be interested in the people in your team. You're getting to know a lot of new people, so make sure you focus on that. The second one is to smile. I think a lot of us don't emphasize this enough, and the power a smile has to change the dynamic and the morale of a room is very, very powerful. So focus on smiling a little more. The third one is to remember that a person's name is incredibly important to them. So try and learn names as fast as possible and use those names often in conversation so that people feel, in a sense, connected to you and that you remember actually who they are, especially if you're working in one of those really, really big companies. Number 4 is all about being a good listener. We mentioned it briefly in step 1, but being a good listener is super important, and encourage people to talk about themselves. Don't talk and give your opinion all the time. Always ask those questions first. The 5th one is to talk in terms of the other person's interests. So if you know that they like something in particular or they work in a particular way, make sure that you adapt the way you talk to them based on those things to have the best conversation possible. It's going to be different for everybody, and that's going to take time. Get to know more people and practice this habit a little more. It's going to become a lot easier. And the last one is to make the other person feel important. So again, the importance of praise, the importance of learning from other people, seeking other people's help, making them feel that they're an important part of the company, they're an important part of your life is very useful. It's just part of that, learning how to create that good impression, learning how to serve others. These are all very useful things to know before entering a company. And the last section on persuasion emphasizes the importance of avoiding stupid arguments, avoiding unnecessary conflict. Conflict is sometimes necessary whenever you're working, obviously, but try and keep those as civil as possible, and make sure that you understand the other person's opinion first before giving your own, and never state that the other person is wrong. Make sure that you, well, don't use those words, those are pretty aggressive words, but make sure that you understand their position first, ask as many questions as you can to truly understand where they're coming from, and then give your 2 cents on the matter. Another important thing is, if you realize you made a mistake or that you're wrong, recognize it immediately and emphatically. Taking ownership of your mistakes is incredibly important. There's also a book called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, a wonderful book as well. I know I'm just recommending books galore when I said I was going to recommend 3, but again, if you want to check it out, it's a fantastic book that talks about this habit specifically. And the last few lessons on persuading people center around letting the other person feel that the idea was his or hers. We're very much attached to our ideas or our concepts or the things we bring to the table, but the more you can make an idea part of a team and the more people can provide input, it just creates ownership of that idea, and that just boosts not only morale and connection within the team, but also performance in general, because everybody feels that they own the idea a little bit. And the final thing is to dramatize the ideas that you're putting forward. So as we know, humans are a storytelling species, and a great way to persuade someone is to place an idea or a concept within a story that is interesting. So practice your storytelling skills, and whenever you want to transmit a very important idea or a very important concept, make sure to wrap it around in a nice story. Take your time to practice that story and deliver it as best you can, because it's gonna go a long way. Sometimes the content of what you're saying is definitely not as powerful as the way that you say it. So I hope all of those were useful. I hope you also enjoyed the extra little book that was thrown in there. If you like this video, I made another video on 4 underrated tips to stand out at work, so that whenever you do land that job, you have all the tools you need to stand out and succeed, because it always pays to be prepared. Thank you for watching, amigos, and see you there.